Greetings and welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today, in the latest of my deep dives, I'm going to explore the journey of Mercury through the charismatic sign of Leo. Mercury, the winged messenger, the planet of talk and thought, but also of analysis and precision, is hosted by Leo from the 11th of July through to the 28th. So only 17 days, so a very quick move-in event. What does it mean to have Mercury in Leo? But also, what's the bigger picture going on with Mercury this year? Remember, all the retrogrades this year, apart from the last week of the year, are located in earth signs. So that's making us think very much, I feel, about the physical reality, and that can be about money. But in the sign of Leo, we're talking about an opportunity to be more self-expressive. And of course, Mars has just left Leo after 6 weeks and moved into Virgo. So we have got a little bit of a juxtaposition going on. But if there is something we want to express in a very warm way and a confident way, this is a great opportunity in order to do so. Now I'm going to share with you a bit more about Mercury in Leo, but then take a look at the event chart from a solar perspective. So how we can all relate to this in terms of the overall zodiac. Then I'm briefly going to go into the event chart from a natal perspective, because that puts Mercury in the first house, where solar it's fifth, of course, just like Leo being the fifth sign. Then I'm going to go on and share each of the zodiac signs with a little bit of an overview for each from the perspective of the sun or the ascendant. If you are new to my channel, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. I do work very hard at these videos, and your support means an enormous amount to me. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. If you're a returning visitor, it's lovely to have you with me once more. Right, so let's dive into this. So you could encounter someone who has got a real sense of their own self when it comes to communicating their ideas. So a strong-minded person with quite firm convictions. Why would that be? Well, it's because of the confidence of Leo, but also the fixed energy of this sign. So if someone has this natally, one of my best friends has got this natally, and absolutely amazingly lovely person, but when she has to ventilate, she has to ventilate. So the chances are we're all going to feel that much more expressive and perhaps passionate about getting our ideas across. It also gives people an opportunity, all of us, to try and look at the big picture. And what we don't want to do, of course, is let the precision of Mercury's rulership of Virgo bog us down when it comes to the warmth of conveying the message or expressing our creativity and talent. So that's a little bit of a flavour of Mercury in Leo. But this is also an opportunity to showcase our talent. So if you are someone who's into performance, whether it's getting up in your local bar and singing on the karaoke, or something a bit more formal, or you do paint or create, you know, you're a maker, this is a wonderful time to really engage with this, but also get communicating with people in your community. If you are someone who's involved with a local amateur dramatic group or a band, this is perfect for you, particularly with Venus in Leo too. Now, of course, Leo is the sign of romance, and if there is someone you encounter over the next 17 days who's good fun to be with, that's something to really savour. But it's also an opportunity for all of us to be a bit more playful, interactive and socialise, because you know, COVID really starved us of a lot of connections with others. Also, if you have children or you're connected to children, grandchildren, for example, their pursuits can provide a lot of enjoyment and stimulation too. Now that's the solar chart, but it is in an opposition with Pluto in the 10th house. Now the reason for this is that Mercury has just stepped into Leo, but the retreating Pluto is still in the sign of Capricorn. So the opposition really occurred on Monday, the 10th of July. So that's when the opposition between Mercury and Pluto was exact. And that may have coincided with a day when someone was a little bit more bloody minded about getting their point of view across, and perhaps even being a bit defensive, with Mercury in the subjective location in Cancer, Pluto being in the very official 10th house, but in Capricorn. That's very much about authority. So if there has been some kind of tete-a-tete just as we're coming into this event, not a complete surprise. But also this event does square up with the moon and the north node. So we could argue in a disassociate way that it's a fixed cross, but with obviously Pluto just tucked up in a cardinal sign rather than a fixed sign. So the node and the moon just in the fixed Taurus, Mercury just in the fixed Leo, but Pluto still in the cardinal Capricorn. So I'm just sharing with you now the solar chart that we can all relate to collectively. Now, just preempting the move of Mercury into Leo, Mercury got into a real standoff with Pluto. If you've ever encountered someone who's got Mercury opposite Pluto in their natal chart, they are someone who can be very trenchant in their viewpoints. In other words, it's their view or the highway. And that can be quite frustrating, that kind of dogma. Now, having Mercury in Cancer also made it more subjective, because the water dilutes the objectivity and detachment that Mercury benefits from in both its rulership of Gemini and also Virgo. So the start of this week may have seen some kind of exchange which was a bit tense. Also, we had some angles. So Mercury and Pluto opposite each other, but then we had the moon and also the north node, but in the fixed Taurus, crossing over, but it's disassociate. Now what happens from the Tuesday as Mercury moves into Leo is that forges the exact square to the node and the moon in Taurus, but then the position of Pluto becomes disassociate. So you can see from the chart that Mercury's in the 5th house, but actually Pluto is in the 10th, because it's the 10th sign, squaring up with the moon and the node in Taurus. So Mercury in the 5th house in isolation gives us an opportunity to really express our talents in a very bubbly, lively way. So if you're someone who's interested in singing karaoke in your local bar, you are in a performance group like a local choir or a local amateur dramatics group, or you are a professional performer of some kind, this definitely can give you an opportunity to showcase and sparkle effervescently with those talents. And also we can just enjoy having more fun and mixing and mingling and just enjoying the fact that we've got Venus there in Leo still. So Venus and Mercury in Leo is really lovely for that interaction. So having fun should be something that we're all giving ourselves permission to enjoy through these 17 days. But let's just look at the chart in terms of the natal event, so the influence that we get that is going to provide a backdrop for the next 17 days. And that moves Mercury into the 1st house, which is interesting because the 1st house is very Aries, so very fiery, just like the 5th house position of Mercury in Leo. But in this chart, Pluto does go directly opposite in the 7th house. This is using Placidus. So what we need to do is balance our need to express ourselves as an individual with how that may be perceived with the people we're trying to relate to, or we're trying to impress or reach out to, or in some cases even compete with. Pluto in the 7th house, the sector in traditional astrology of open enemies. But certainly Mercury in the 1st house in Leo will give us more confidence to be more inquiring and curious. So even if we're someone who tends to be a bit reticent, I think there's a lot of engagement possibilities over the next few weeks. Our minds are going to be lively. But the Pluto energy suggests that not everything necessarily will be on our terms. So we could encounter someone who's more resistant to what we have to say. And of course, we're having Mars in an opposition with Saturn. I think as we go through this phase of July, it's not going to be a walk in the proverbial park in terms of our interactions. So the bubbliness, the creativity, the warmth, the ebullience of Mercury in the first house in Leo is lovely, but we have to try and make it work in terms of our interactions. And as I say, Mercury opposite Pluto can make people quite bombastic, to be honest. So we could encounter someone who's pointing their finger and saying, well, this is how it will be, which isn't very pleasant. And also with Saturn opposite Mars, I think a lot of frustration is going to come in for a lot of us, particularly on the 20th of July, when that particular aspect reaches a peak. So what we can do, I think, to enjoy Mercury in Leo, along with Venus, but be conscious that Mars is in the more precise Virgo and is being afflicted by Saturn, and we do have that cross, that fixed cross in terms of Mercury and the position of the North Node, the Moon and the South Node, but in a disassociate way with the position of the cardinal Pluto, is that whatever we do will have some kind of consequence. So we can have fun, we can even be a little bit more hedonistic. We just need to be aware of how that will play out or be seen by those people we interact with. Now, please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces and give you a flavour of what to expect. So Aries, for you, Mercury in your sister fire sign of Leo definitely offers opportunity for fun. But of course, the combination of Mars in your 6th house being oppressed by Saturn in your 12th, well, that's quite tough. It makes me think of when we're about 17 or 18 and we're wanting to meet up with our friends for a crafty first drink, and our parents are expecting us to be applying ourselves to our homework, contributing to the household chores, and just basically being very reliable and solid just at the point when we want to really let our hair down. So I think that could be a little bit of the flavour of what you feel over this next couple of weeks. However, what you could do is when it comes to some of the chores that you do need to attend to, you could whack the music up loud and dance your way through doing the hoovering, and that would be a good way to get a balance between these two principles. So you can also take your physical vitality and exercise regimes much more seriously, but also decide to make it fun. So if you go for a park run, you're with other people who are all in a similar boat, and that in itself can be something that's very uplifting but virtuous, Mars in the 6th house, but you're still having that social dimension. So I think that's the best way to apply this particular transition. You can have fun, but there can be some obligations too. So Taurus, Mercury moving into Leo is going to accentuate your home situation. Mercury can be about commerce. If you're working from home and you don't feel you've got quite enough space, or your desk isn't quite lit right, or there's the washing around you, a great opportunity to reorder things in some kind of way. Now, because as this event occurs, there is the combination between the Moon and the North Node in your sign. It squares up with Mercury. So it's going to be important not to be at cross purposes with your own individual needs, whether it's to do with the people you choose to be in your family, or blood relatives, or your domestic environment. But because Mars is in the 5th house of your situation, that's pushing you to be much more outgoing and charismatic, just when Venus and Mercury are asking you perhaps to take a little bit of a breath and just pause and think about the emotional construct of your situation. If you're someone who finds it a little bit difficult to say how you feel about your emotions, I think Mercury does give you a chance to grapple with this, because Leo is a much more confident host than Mercury was in Cancer. Cancer hosting Mercury for you actually does give you an opportunity to chat with people like siblings or people you encounter every day, but it is still potentially bogged down by the moisture, the wet of the water sign of Cancer. But in the fire sign of Leo, even if you feel a bit diffident about some rather sensitive strands, there is that chance you can say how you feel. But because Saturn is applying to Mars at the moment, it's just whether you feel a bit of an inner blockage. If you do find, despite the Leo energy, that you do want to withdraw a little bit at times, just don't beat yourself up. One of the things that Mercury in the 4th house can do is see our ideas circulate around our mind, but particularly our emotional ideas, but we don't always find it quite so easy to articulate them. Remember, Leo is a proud sign. So even though Mercury can be about talk and thought, in Leo it could be about making sure that your facade is well constructed, because you don't want anyone to know some of your vulnerabilities. So those are just a few of the scenarios that could play out for you over the next 17 days. So Gemini, having your ruler Mercury move into your 3rd house is absolutely divine. You've already got Venus here, you've had Mars here for 6 weeks, giving you a lot of ability to be persuasive and passionate in the way that you express yourself. Mercury can make you a little bit cuter than Mars. Mars is a bit more blunt. That's moved into your 4th house, the emotional world, and it is of course opposed by Saturn. So balancing home and work demands may prove a bit challenging through July. But I think Mercury in the 3rd house definitely is going to add to your natural dexterity, your ability to swivel on a sixpence or a cent is definitely going to be accentuated. So some playful interactions, expect a lot more text messages and emails over the next few weeks for sure. And if you are into internet dating at the moment, it's going to be a lot of flirtatious exchanges, I feel. So Cancer, Mercury moving into the sign of Leo for you is house 2, but it squares up with your ruler, the moon, and the node in house 11. One of the things I feel that you can gain from this over the next 17 days is that your thinking around your everyday resources can become clearer and sharper and more expressive. And I feel that you have this reputation of avoiding conflict, but because of Mars now being in your 3rd house and opposite Saturn, people may find you unexpectedly more direct, even blunt at times. If you feel that, look, you've gone through the process with something over and over, and maybe with the same person, and not getting it, you're really sure about what your position is in terms of your values, Mercury in the 2nd house. Leo amplifies your confidence, but Mars opposite Saturn across the 3rd and 9th house axis just sees you go, right, cutting through. You're going to say it more directly. And I think that's a really good thing. But you can often be very generous and protective to those that are important to you. And Leo can be a very big sign when it comes to looking out for those who are less fortunate. So I think that gives you a flavour. You're going to become more conscious of your self-worth, resources, converting an idea that's been evolving for a while into something more tangible. But you could be generous to those that you care about. But I feel that if someone has been basically playing not a deliberate game, but being a bit evasive, you may just be much more to the point. Leo, Mercury moving into your own sign is terrific, because as it's gone through Cancer, it's in your 12th house, which can accentuate anxieties and worries and see us sort of amplifying the intangible part of life, so our subconscious. So if you had some difficult dreams of late, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. Mercury moving into Leo brings you into the present and that's great. There's nothing like being in the present. It's something we're all trying to see all of the time. And of course, because Venus is still with you, your charisma burns brightly. Absolutely lovely. You do have the moon and the node very close to the surface in your 10th house. Just getting a balance between what you want as an individual and how that's going to relate to how you connect to a boss or someone that maybe you're trying to cultivate in a business context. That may take a little bit of patience, but Mercury in your sign is going to speed things up, and that's really exciting. Virgo, your ruler Mercury moving into Leo, sees it go into your 12th house. Now, I've been saying to you for some while that I feel that this summer is going to be a time of deep reflection for your relationships, not least because since March the 7th you've had Saturn in your sector of relating. Neptune's been there since 2012, and then the arrival of Venus and then Mars, which has now arrived in your sign, have been really accentuating the 12th house, which is seeing you thinking very deeply about what's right for you. So Mercury in the 12th house is great. It's great to explore. It's great to research. If you find yourself reading and learning more about psychology, for example, it wouldn't be a surprise. But also because you're someone who has a strong sense of service, you might try to look out for someone who perhaps is feeling isolated, perhaps going through some stress or depression. Your sensitivity in this regard could be very strong. But if you're not feeling entirely happy around your romantic situation, I think Mercury moving into this area is seeing you think ever more deeply about what you might eventually decide to do. So Libra, the arrival of Mercury in Leo, on the face of it, gives you some sparkling opportunities to network and socialise through to the end of July. It's just the problem of Mars being in opposition with Saturn across two very sensitive points. So if you're drawn towards people that you have a shared sort of credo, you know, you have values that really align, it's friends you've known for a very long time that really you do feel comfortable with, meeting up with them could be very, very satisfying. But I do feel that some relationships could be teased out where you can't quite be sure about certain people, and that's unfortunately because of Mars being in the 12th house. If we look at this event from a more natal perspective, Mercury of course is in the 1st house, and that moves Pluto into the 7th, which has a flavour of your sign. So what I feel for you essentially is that you are somebody who can see the big picture. You also can see the direction of travel. So whether it's about fashion, music, politics, societal changes, that skill of yours is really going to be maximised through to the end of July. But just be aware of within your network, I think it needs to be the most trusted people that you are linking with. So Scorpio, Mercury moving into Leo, sees it climb into the most visible part of your situation. If you need to speak to someone influential, or you're thinking about retraining, learning some new skills, Mercury is just perfect for you in this location, because what you're getting is that extra spark of confidence from Leo, along with the charm and diplomacy of Venus, and also because your ruler Mars is in a part of your situation that's to do with your future plans, a lot of thrust. Now, I totally accept that Saturn is applying the handbrake, so that thrust has to be applied really accurately. But if you do want to raise your profile, the next few weeks is really an ideal opportunity in order to do so. So Sagittarius, Mercury moving into your sister fire sign of Leo, triggers a kind of Sagittarius energy, because for you it's house 9, so the fire tropicity is re-emphasized, and Mercury is already quite a curious influence in Leo, but that's given even more thrust because your sign, your ruler of Jupiter, that 9th house influence, always gives you a huge appetite for downloading new information. So whether you find yourself traveling between now and the end of July, or checking out some higher education courses, or perhaps even some online training, it really would all fit to this event. I think Mercury in Leo also pushes you, strangely, because obviously Leo is a fixed sign, but for you this is pushing you to perhaps be a little bit more flexible, which seems odd, but remember, you're not a sum of only your ascendant or your sun. There will be the other factors in your natal chart. So if there are certain patterns that you adhere to, I think Mercury and Venus in Leo pushing you to be a little bit more daring and step outside your comfort zone. And with Mars in such a dominant 10th house, albeit somewhat restricted by Saturn, you have the extra oomph and confidence to try out things. So I think an exciting few weeks is in prospect for you. So Capricorn, Mercury moving into Leo gives you an opportunity to move from the friendly interaction, the detached conversations of Mercury in Cancer, into the part of your situation which helps you to decipher what people really mean. So it's not the words they're expressing to you, it's actually the subtext. So your ability to grapple with all that's beneath the surface definitely emphasised over the next few weeks. You already have Venus in this area. If you are a business person, as Capricornians often can be, or you have a role within a bigger business that sees you manage people, or you're working on business development, this is a great change, because Mercury and Venus together can really bring out your commercial expertise and acumen and just emphasize it that much more. And with Mars in quite an experimental and adventurous part of your situation, this would be an excellent time to really try to find new ways to evolve your role or your product or your enterprise. What about your ruler Saturn opposite Mars? Well, it just suggests that if you are going to have conversations, you need to accept that someone else can have a different opinion, put it that way. And the key here is not to react too quickly. It's just give yourself a little bit of time to think before you respond. Aquarius, Mercury moving into the 7th house is absolutely terrific for you, to be honest, because Mercury is exalted in your sign. It also rules the second decan of Aquarius. So you're a natural communicator, you're an air sign. For sure, Mercury is opposite, but what that's going to do is just accentuate that talent you have actually for being, really quite detached. If other people have different viewpoints to you, you're not generally threatened by that. It's live and let live as far as you're concerned, as long as they conform to certain values and standards that are important to you. Now, in my case, I really like good manners, which might seem to be quite old-fashioned. But Mercury in the 7th house, of course, is about relating. So with Venus there as well, if there is someone you need to convey a message to, whether it's in business or it is romantically, or even, a personal conversation around the family, I feel that you can put your message across in a very skilled and measured way, and the chances are therefore the other person is going to really appreciate the care that you're taking. It's just that because Mercury does immediately square up with Venus and the node, and it is in an opposition with Pluto just tucked up behind your sign, there are some more emotional dimensions floating around that you just need to be conscious of. So some of the conversations that could go on over the next couple of weeks definitely can be about home-based issues. I feel that is almost certain. With Mars in your 8th house, your desire to improve your lot is very strong. But I think Mercury is asking you to stay cool, stay detached, and your listening skills definitely come into focus. If you're a very good listener, people are really going to appreciate that about you in the next few weeks. If that's something that's less your thing, an opportunity to sharpen up on that for you. So Pisces, Mercury moving into Leo is going to sharpen up your desire for precision. Now yours is a sign that can be drifting and dreamy through your rulership of Neptune. With Saturn in the early parts of Pisces at the moment, it's asking you to be more businesslike, more grounded. Some people may experience you, Pisces, as being a little bit dreamy and drifty, hard to pin down. Other people may see a different group of Pisces people who can run on the cool side. It depends on, obviously the natal chart involved, but I think Mercury moving into Leo gives you an opportunity to continue the earthiness that Saturn's urging you to embrace since it arrived on the 7th of March. So looking for tangible progress, if you're working on something you want to physically see an outcome. So whatever you're spending your time on, if it produces something tangible, that is going to give you greater satisfaction. It's just that Mercury does square up with the Moon and the North Node on the point of your chart that's to do a quick conversation. So because Mercury in the 6th house can be quite virtuous, that square suggests that you could actually try to be too virtuous. And because Saturn is opposing Mars on that point of where you contact other people, you don't want to overwhelm yourself. So even if you're trying to get a bit earthier about things, trying to get things working more efficiently, I wouldn't overload yourself with too many obligations and schedules and lists to work through. You are, after all, quite a fluid and flexing sign due to your mutability. So good to be grounded, good to be earthy, good to use the flamboyance of Leo, but don't overwhelm yourself with too many expectations. Thank you so much for watching my video on Mercury's transition through Leo. I'd just like to share with you a very special opportunity. This year is absolutely speeding by. Year 2024 is racing towards us. If you order your year 2024 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data now, I'll prepare for you the rest of year 2023 free of charge. Further, you get 30% off if you also get my character analysis report for you, your life roadmap, which will give you an ear and insights into the patterns that have played out in your life so far. If you don't know your time, I have developed a new solar package. Please see below where you can check out information on both these opportunities.